This is Election 2020, New Mexico House District 35. I'm Fred Martino. KRWG Public Media and the League of Women Voters pleased to present today's forum. The rules are simple. Candidates have up to 60 seconds to answer each question and should not mention their opponent in the answer. My co-host from the League is Dale Yeo, and we welcome candidates Angelica Rubio and Richelle Ponder. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our first question, and we'll begin with Angelica. In what ways, if any, should the tax system in New Mexico be reformed? Explain.
Thanks, Fred. So our tax system is pretty complex and complicated at the moment. But I think back in 2019, we started to make some inroads in terms of really building a roadmap on how we make it more progressive and less regressive, making sure that there's accountability, transparency, and especially equity, making sure that in a multicultural state that everybody's paying a fair share and that many communities of color are not having to fit the bill when it comes to taxes. We're still recovering from some of the tax breaks that were done in 2013 as well as 2003. And based on the legislation that we were able to pass in 2009 or 2019, and with our new chair, who's Representative Javier Martinez, I think we're headed in a direction where when we're talking about everyone should be paying their fair share, that's the roadmap in which we're beginning to move towards.
Okay, thank you. Richelle.
Thank you, Fred. I think it's vitally important that we continue to work hard at overhauling the tax system so it is fair to everyone, especially to the hardworking families in New Mexico who go out there every day and work hard. And it's that money that is supporting our system. It's on the backs of the hardworking people of New Mexico. I think that in addition to helping the hardworking working families in this state, I think we need to give tax incentives to small businesses and all businesses, not just tax incentives for specific industries like the film industry or the energy industry. Tax incentives should be fair and for all businesses, not just specific businesses.
Thank you. Dale.
Richelle, should New Mexico continue to tax Social Security benefits? Please explain.
Absolutely not. You know, that is one of my key reasons for deciding to run. New Mexico is one of only 13 states that taxes Social Security income. And you know, you are taxed on that when you earn that income. And this tax is so unfair because it targets both the elderly and the disabled people in New Mexico. So it's a very, very unfair tax, and it's one that I am going to work hard at repealing.
Angelica?
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, I don't believe that we should be taxing Social Security. We've actually had this debate earlier this year, where at least 6 pieces of legislation were introduced by legislators, both in the House and in the Senate. I think because of the inundation of legislation during this past session, that didn't really gain a lot of momentum. But I believe that as we move forward into the next legislative session in January, this is an issue that's going to come forward, and I absolutely support taking away that tax on Social Security.
Okay, our third question now. Starting pay for teachers is nearly 20% lower in New Mexico as compared to districts in El Paso, which start at more than $50,000 a year. Angelica, we'll start with you on this. How do you assess efforts to make the state's salaries more competitive?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I believe that we should absolutely raise salaries for teachers, but not only just for teachers, but also for folks who are employed A lot of assistants are part of the educational system, which I support, raising salaries for that. You know, Yazi Martinez versus New Mexico was a case that was decided by the Supreme Court that not only addressed issues related to salaries, but how our investments in education should be as equitable as possible. With the history that we have in our state related to issues around colonialism, I think there's issues that we have yet to address when it comes to that. And Yazi Martinez versus New Mexico provided us an opportunity to do that. The governor this year attempted to appeal that Supreme Court ruling. I opposed that appeal along with other legislators, particularly folks from Native and Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Angelica. We're out of time. Richelle.
Well, teachers are overwhelmed, especially with the way education is being handled right now. And of course, they need to make more money, and especially given that they can go to states, neighboring states, and make more money. We have to find a way to incentivize teachers to stay in New Mexico. Quality teachers are at the core of what makes an education system work. And it is time that we take a hard look at how we handle education, not just the pay rate, the pay scale, but how we're going to address it going forward. If we're going to keep our schools closed, teachers need some assistance in getting better trained in handling how to educate without being in a classroom. And that hasn't happened. And we need to make sure that teachers are always trained with whatever skills that they need to provide our children with the best education. And it's high time that New Mexico get off the bottom of the list for being the worst in education, and we've got to do something to make it better. I would really like to see the incentive system.
Dale.
Yes. What should the legislature do to improve the New Mexico economy and ensure job growth? Richelle.
Thank you, Dale. I think the very first thing that we need to do to improve the economy in New Mexico is to completely open the economy. I think that the way that the governor handled shutdown of all of the businesses in New Mexico has been just horrible. And there are still businesses that are not allowed to open. And so that is number one. We've got to let the businesses open, and open fairly and open safely, so that we can get back to work and get our economy back moving in the right direction. I think we need to eliminate taxes and regulations on small businesses so that they can provide more jobs.
Yeah, Dale, could you repeat the question, please?
What should the legislature, what should the legislature do to improve the New Mexico economy and ensure job growth?
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Right now, I think over the course of the last 4 years, one of the issues that I have been really trying to lead and push efforts on is diversifying our economy, because we are heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry. And there are many opportunities in which we can start building around that. And so it's not only just improving issues around economic development, which I support, but also revenue streams. We talked briefly about the tax code. That's important that we continue to update the tax code as well. But also, I've been a champion when it comes to the outdoor economy and how we improve how we improve economic development ideas around that. In terms of how the response has been done around COVID, I think that it's important to really recognize the fact that we are in a global pandemic. I don't know how many times we have to actually say that out loud for people to recognize that decisions that are being made to uplift the health and public safety of our, and the health and safety of our communities is priority. And so in terms of COVID, we should certainly do our best to look at what recovery looks like beyond. But for now, this
Thank
is
you. Thank you, Angelica. We're out of time there, but we are moving on to healthcare right now for the next question. What actions do you support to improve the accessibility and quality of healthcare in New Mexico, if any? Angelica.
Thanks, Fred. I absolutely support healthcare coverage for all New Mexicans. One of the cornerstone policies that exist for our state is Medicaid. And so Medicaid buy-in was an option and a piece of legislation that I certainly supported last year during the legislative session. We have more than 180,000 people in the state, across the state, who are uninsured, mainly because health insurance costs are just so high. And so because Medicaid has worked so well in this state, it's definitely a proposal that I'm hopeful will be reintroduced in January, so that we can get more New Mexicans insured and giving them the opportunity to access a lot of that quality healthcare, especially here in New Mexico when we're talking about jobs and the importance of the work that exists in the state. Healthcare is one of those big industries here in the state, and so it works. It should be able to work seamlessly when it comes to what we're able to provide for our communities when they have access to that quality care.
Thank you. Richelle.
You know, having insurance is important, but if you have all the insurance in the world and there's no doctors in your community, then what good is the insurance? So I think if we take a step back and look at what's happening in the medical community, quality doctors are leaving our communities. There's a big medical facility here that's full of orthopedic surgeons, and it recently closed this year. And all of those orthopedic surgeons relocated into Texas because Texas has a more friendly environment for doctors to run their businesses. Medical malpractice ceilings in New Mexico are $600,000. And the Democratic legislature has voted to increase that. And in Texas, it's $200,000. So it's more attractive for doctors to practice in Texas.
Thank you, Richelle. Dale?
The state.
Yes, back to a question about education. Are you satisfied with how much money was allocated to the Early Childhood Trust Fund in the 2020 legislative session? Explain, Richelle?
You know, the legislature appropriated $320 million to early childhood education, and that's a great start. But like I said before, education needs to be overhauled. There are a lot of problems, and if you have the schools remaining closed, how can somebody who is in early childhood between, you know, birth to kindergarten, they're going to have a hard time sitting in front of a computer in Zoom learning environment. So we have to find a way to educate these kids and get that money to those kids so that they have a better start. Maybe it's time that we look at giving some of that money to parents so that they can stay home and educate their children when they're between birth and 3 or 4 or 5 years old. There's nothing better than having a mother or a grandmother to teach a child in those early years. And if you give some tax incentives to people so that they can stay home and educate their kids that way, I think that would be a great way to go.
Angelica.
Thanks for that question. It's really important for folks to understand that while the Early Childhood Trust Fund was an incredible piece of legislation that we voted on, which I supported, there has been a long journey when it comes to how we fully fund early childhood education. And for me, and I fully support tapping into the permanent fund, which is a discussion and a debate that we have had for a very, very long time. I feel like, unfortunately, the Early Childhood Trust Fund, while it's something that I did support, it did take away from the ongoing debate around tapping into the permanent fund, which would be sustainable for the long term. And so I think all of the things that make early childhood education so important, whether it's from the time that a child is born until through their entire educational system or journey, that being able to have money readily available through the early childhood, using the permanent fund to pay for early childhood education is very important. It's unclear moving into January what will happen to this trust fund, and so I think we need to take another look at the land grant permanent fund again.
Okay, we'll move on now to another continuing issue in the legislature. Do you favor the legalization of recreational marijuana in New Mexico? Explain. Angelica?
Thanks, Fred. Yes, I absolutely support the legalization of cannabis here in the state of New Mexico. I was the co-sponsor on the legislation. I support the legislation, especially because I believe that we also have to address within the policy that we're presenting on related to criminal justice reform and expungement. The war on drugs put a lot of Black and brown men in prison because of cannabis, and it is really our responsibility to really correct and to correct our past in terms of how we address that issue. And my hope is that as we introduce this legislation again in January, that not only will it include legislation and language related to criminal justice reforms and expungement, but that that we can also actually finally see it pass this coming year.
Thank you. Richelle.
Thank you, Fred. You know, the legalization of marijuana is very appealing on the surface, especially when you think about the tax revenue that would be available through that policy. However, we have to take a good hard look at the long-term effects of it and what it would do. You know, marijuana has harmful effects on the user, both physically and mentally. Not only that, but in states where it has been legalized, there's been increases in insurance and increases in traffic accidents and in work-related accidents, and finding people who are able to pass drug tests so that they can go to work. So there are lots of problems that are involved with this that we really need to take a look at it before we move forward with this legislation.
Thank you. Dale.
Richelle, should it be legal in New Mexico for a physician to assist a patient in dying? Please explain.
So this question is a very sticky question. And, you know, the time of life, at the end of your life, is such a personal and private matter. I remember when my dad was very sick and we were trying to make end-of-life decisions for him. And we sat down as a family, my mom, my dad, both of my brothers, we all sat together as a family and discussed this. And it was a very personal issue. And I really do support hospice and end-of-life care. But I also have a good friend who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was given 3 months to live, and that was a year ago, July, and he's still alive. And so I think that this is such a personal question, and I really believe that it should be left to God to decide when your days are done.
Angelica?
Thanks, Dale. I definitely support the concept. Representative Debbie Armstrong has been introducing that legislation for several years now. I do have my own concerns, though, related to how this idea of end of life is also one in which comes from privilege, especially when I represent countless communities of color who are disproportionately impacted by health-related issues, and within many of these communities, there's a history of exploitation and medical racism, failures of healthcare ethics, et cetera. And so there is a lot of distrust when it comes to just issues related to medicine. And so I certainly want to have a much longer debate and dialogue around this issue, which I'm hopeful we will be able to do in January, because I think there's a lot of questions still around some of the concerns that I have as it pertains to this issue.
Thank you, Angelica. Angelica, this question will begin with you on. Do you support any adjustments to current gun regulations? Explain.
Thanks, Fred. At the moment, no. I mean, I am 100% in full support of the legislation that we passed over the course of the last couple of years. I am fully in support of the governor and her decisions to really champion issues related to how we address issues around gun violence. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, Richelle.
Well, Fred, I am fully in support of the Second Amendment, and I am very opposed to the red flag law. The red flag law as written is very problematic because it puts the burden on the counties to enforce it and to defend it. So if somebody files a lawsuit, it's up to the counties to defend the lawsuit. And the legislation was not written to fund any of the counties to help them enforce it. I think that it also leaves out innocent until proven guilty. Your guns can be taken away from you without any proof of any mental instability, just somebody's word saying they think that you're a danger. And anybody can say that, and then you've got to defend that later on. So the legislation as written is very problematic.
Thank you, Dale.
Richelle, should New Mexico promote renewable energy? If so, how?
Dale, I've always been a fan of solar energy, especially when you look at how many days of sunshine New Mexico has every year. I'm a big fan of that, but we have to look at how sustainable that is going forward and how affordable it is. And, you know, electric bills all over Doña Ana County were sky high this summer. And, you know, I don't know if that is because El Paso Electric has increased our rates to support renewable energies. And if the cost of renewable energy is going to be on the backs of families that are trying to pay their electric bill, I have a problem with that. We've got to find a better way to keep our energy bills low so that families don't have to decide whether they're going to eat or whether they're going to have the lights on.
Yes, Angelica?
Thanks, Dale. So first and foremost, climate change is real, and it's something that I think we as legislators should be really encouraging in terms of of why this issue is so critical, especially for the state of New Mexico, because we are certainly getting hit hard. I mean, it's the middle of October right now, and it's pretty warm outside. And so, yes, I do support renewable energy. I think it is an option that we could potentially use to not only diversify our economy, but also diversify our energy plans. But furthermore, I think it's really thinking about how we pursue workforce development. I passed legislation last year to fund a study, which that study came out last month. It's the Department of Workforce Solutions was in collaboration with UNM to really look at how we can move towards a greener economy without leaving workers behind. And so renewables are certainly a part of that.
Thank you, Angelica. We've come to our final question now. What is the role of the state, if any, in abortion regulation? Angelica.
Thanks, Fred. This issue is a real important issue for me, especially in the place that we find ourselves in this country, particularly around the Supreme Court and this strong opposition to women and their personal decisions to take on such an important issue. As a state, I am in favor of repealing old legislation or old statutes that criminalize women who decide to make these tough decisions. And I believe that every woman has a right to reproductive health and the state of New Mexico, as a legislator, I will continue to support that.
Thank you. Richelle.
I'm in favor of reproductive health for women, absolutely. But I believe that abortion should not be used as birth control. And I don't believe that state funding or federal funding should be used to promote or to administer abortions. I just don't. And I am very much opposed to the partial birth abortion or late term abortions that House Bill 51 allows.
Okay, thank you very much. We very much appreciate you joining us today. We are out of time. Thank you for being here for Election 2020, New Mexico House District 35. Thanks to the candidates Angelica Rubio and Richelle Ponder, and to my co-host, Dale Yeo. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.